February 17th, 1963, 9:40 p.m. A back room above a bar on 125th Street, Harlem. The man who broke the rule was named Eli Turner. Everyone in that room knew him. He handled collections. He walked money across lines nobody else crossed. When Eli spoke, doors opened. When he vouched for someone, they were safe. That night, Eli Turner took $40,000 from the Italian crew downtown. Cash meant for protection payments, cash that was already counted, already promised, already late. He took it because his wife was dying. The Italians wanted leverage in Harlem. They offered Eli a deal. Move the envelope. Delay the delivery. Skim nothing. Just hold it for 48 hours. In return, they'd connect him to a private doctor in Queens who didn't ask questions and demanded payment up front. Eli said yes. That decision bought his wife 2 more weeks of breathing. It also signed his death warrant. By 9:42 p.m., the room knew. The razor lay flat on the table, clean, thin, shining under one bare bulb. Across from it sat Walter Razor Dean, the man sent to collect answers. He wasn't raised to yell. He wasn't paid to threaten. He was paid to end uncertainty. Razor didn't ask where the money was. He asked, "Who else knows?" Eli swallowed. His hands shook despite his effort to steady them on his knees. "Nobody," he said. "Just me." That was the wrong answer. Because the money wasn't just missing. It had spoken. Italians didn't move blind. The delay had already traveled through 3 mouths and 2 payphones. By the time Razor walked into that room, downtown knew Harlem had slipped, and Harlem didn't forgive slips. Razor leaned forward, picked up the blade and turned it sideways between his fingers. "You were trusted," he said. "That's why I'm here and not someone louder." Eli tried to explain. He talked about the hospital, the invoices, the doctor who wouldn't touch his wife unless the cash was real and immediate. He said the money would be back by Friday, no loss, no exposure. Razor listened. Then he shook his head once. "This isn't about the money," Razor said. "It's about who can reach through you." That's when Eli realized the danger wasn't theoretical anymore. Because if Italians could buy time through him, they could buy routes, names, schedules. Every safe thing he ever carried would become a map. Razor stood up. Outside, a car engine idled too long for coincidence. Inside, Eli's mouth went dry. Razor didn't cut him. Not yet. He slid the blade back onto the table and said, "You have until midnight." "To do what?" Eli asked. Razor paused at the door. "Decide who you're loyal to," he said, "and who you're willing to bury to prove it." The door closed. Eli Turner sat alone with the razor, the clock ticking toward midnight, and the knowledge that someone, his wife, himself, or someone he loved, was not going to see morning. And the question hanging in the room was simple. Who would Eli sacrifice to make this right? Eli Turner didn't leave the room right away. He stared at the razor until the ticking clock began to sound like footsteps. Midnight was 2 hours and 20 minutes away. Enough time to make 1 call and maybe 2. Not enough time to fix a mistake this large. He slid the blade into his coat pocket, not as a weapon, but as a reminder, and went downstairs into the cold. 2 blocks east, in a 3rd-floor walk-up with a busted stair rail, Samuel Turner sat at the kitchen table pretending not to cough. Samuel was Eli's younger brother by 4 years and older by a lifetime of bad decisions. He'd just gotten out of Sing Sing 6 months earlier. Armed robbery, wrong place, wrong crew, wrong night. Now he was on parole, working nights loading trucks, trying to stay invisible. The coughing wouldn't let him. It shook his chest hard enough to rattle the cheap glass on the table. He pressed a rag to his mouth until the spasm passed, then folded it quickly. There was blood on the fabric, not a lot. Enough. He didn't want Eli to see that. Eli knocked once and let himself in. He always did. "You're late," Samuel said, forcing a smile. "Yeah," Eli replied. "I know." Eli smelled the iron in the air immediately. He looked at the rag. Samuel followed his eyes and closed his hand around it. "It's nothing," Samuel said. "Cold." Eli didn't argue. He took off his coat and sat down across from him. Samuel noticed the tension first. Eli's hands. The way his eyes kept cutting to the window. "What happened?" Samuel asked. Eli didn't answer. He reached into his pocket and set the razor on the table between them. Samuel's smile vanished. "That's not yours," he said. "No," Eli replied. "It's a message." Eli told him everything, not in circles, not dressed up. He said the money was gone. He said Razor Dean had been there. He said midnight mattered. When he finished, Samuel leaned back slowly, like the chair might collapse if he moved too fast. "You're saying they think you're open," Samuel said. "I am," Eli answered, "for 2 hours." Samuel stood and began pacing despite the cough. Each step made it worse. "You can't give it back," Samuel said. "Even if you had it, once they see you bend, it doesn't stop." "I know." "So what are you thinking?" Eli hesitated. This was the part he'd been avoiding since the back room. "I need to show them the Italians don't own me," he said, "that they can't use me as a door." Samuel stopped pacing. "And how do you do that?" Eli looked at his brother. Samuel understood immediately. "No," he said, "absolutely not." "You know their runner," Eli said. "You worked docks with him. You know where he stays." "I know where he used to stay," Samuel shot back, "and I'm on parole. You forget that part?" "That's why it works," Eli said. "They won't expect it from you." Samuel laughed once, sharp and humorless, then doubled over coughing again. This time he didn't bother hiding the blood. "You want me to touch Italian money?" Samuel said, wiping his mouth. "With my record. With my lungs falling apart. You want me to disappear so you can prove something?" "I want you alive," Eli said. "Both of us." Samuel stared at him. "That's not what this is," he said quietly. The clock on the wall clicked to 10:11. Samuel sat back down. His voice dropped. "If I do this," he said, "and they catch me, I don't come back from it, prison or worse. You know that." Eli nodded. "And if I don't," Samuel continued, "you're dead by morning." "Yes." Silence filled the kitchen. Somewhere below them, a radio played low and off-key. Samuel reached for the razor, turned it in his fingers, then pushed it back. "You always protected me," he said. "Since we were kids." Eli didn't respond. Samuel looked up. "Is there another way?" he asked. Eli thought of his wife, of the oxygen machine, of Razor's voice. "No," he said. Samuel closed his eyes. Outside, a car slowed beneath the window and idled. Samuel opened his eyes again. "Then we don't have until midnight," he said. "We have until they decide to come upstairs." And the question neither of them said out loud was heavier than the money itself. Would proving loyalty cost Eli his brother, or cost Samuel his last chance to survive? 10:24 p.m. They didn't argue anymore. Arguing was for people with time. Samuel pulled on his coat, thin shoulders disappearing into fabric that no longer fit him right. Eli watched him from the doorway, noticing things he'd ignored for months. The weight loss, the shallow breathing, the way Samuel braced himself before every step. "You still remember the route?" Eli asked. Samuel nodded. Can't forget a thing that almost got you killed. The Italian runner's name was Marco Bellini. Low-level, reliable. The kind of man who never asked questions because he didn't need answers. Marco handled drop-offs near the river, short walks, dark corners, no witnesses. Tonight he was scheduled to move the same money Eli had delayed. The envelope would be smaller now, split, more eyes on it, which made this worse. Eli handed Samuel a folded slip of paper, an address, a time window, nothing else. You don't take the money, Eli said. You don't touch it. You just let them see you. Samuel stopped with his hand on the doorknob. Seen doing what? Being in the way, Eli replied. Being a problem. Samuel looked back at him. That's not a plan, he said. It's the only signal left. The idea was simple and dangerous. If Samuel spooked the runner, forced him to abort or reroute, it would prove Eli hadn't handed Harlem over clean. It would show interference, resistance. But it also put Samuel directly in Italian crosshairs. You sure Razor buys that? Samuel asked. He buys proof, Eli said. Nothing else. Samuel opened the door. Then pray your proof doesn't get me buried, he said. The hallway swallowed him. Eli stood there longer than he should have. When he finally moved, he didn't sit down. He checked the window, the street. The car was gone. That didn't make him feel better. 11:02 p.m. Samuel stood under the elevated tracks near the river, the cold seeping into his bones. He watched dock workers pass, counted footsteps, timed shadows. He spotted Marco at 11:11. Same code as always, same pace. Too calm for a man carrying other people's futures in his pocket. Samuel stepped forward. Hey, he called. Marco stopped, turned slowly. They recognized each other instantly. You shouldn't be here, Marco said. That's funny, Samuel replied. I was thinking the same thing. Marco's hand moved. Not to a weapon, but to his coat, to the envelope. Samuel raised his hands. Relax, he said. I'm not here for that. Marco smiled thinly. Then why are you here? Samuel took a step closer. His chest burned. He forced himself not to cough. Because your bosses think my brother is soft, he said, and I want them to know they're wrong. Marco's smile faded. You think this helps him? Marco asked. You being stupid in public? Samuel leaned in. I think it makes noise, he said. And right now noise is the point. Marco looked past Samuel, scanning the dark. How many with you? He asked. Enough, Samuel lied. Marco hesitated. That was the mistake. From across the street, headlights flared. Too bright, too sudden. Samuel realized at the same time Marco did. This wasn't Italian muscle. The car doors opened. Harlem men. Razor hadn't waited until midnight. Samuel's stomach dropped. He backed away slowly, hands still up. Marco cursed under his breath and turned to run. The first shot cracked the air. Not aimed at Samuel, not aimed at Marco. A warning. The kind that said everyone is already in danger. Samuel bolted toward the river, lungs screaming. Footsteps thundered behind him. He slipped on wet pavement, caught himself, tasted blood. He ducked behind a stack of crates just as another shot rang out. He pressed himself flat, shaking, and realized something worse than being chased. Razor hadn't come for Marco. Razor had come to see who would move, and Samuel had just shown his hand. Back in Harlem, Eli's phone rang. He answered without speaking. Razor's voice came through calm and certain. Your brother's faster than I expected, Razor said, but not smarter. The line went dead. Eli looked at the clock. 11:27 p.m.? Midnight was coming. And whatever Eli thought he was proving was already unraveling into something he couldn't control. The question now wasn't whether Samuel would survive the night. It was whether Eli could stop the blade from landing where Razor intended. Samuel lay behind the crates, counting breaths instead of seconds. Each inhale felt thinner than the last. He pressed his face into his sleeve to keep from coughing, knowing the sound would give him away faster than movement. Footsteps approached, not rushed, measured. Razor's men didn't hunt like amateurs. They let fear do the running. A flashlight beam cut across the dock, paused on the edge of the crates, then moved on. Samuel waited until it faded before shifting his weight. That's when he heard Marco scream. Not loud, not long, just enough to end suddenly. Samuel froze. They hadn't chased Marco, they'd let him run, and now Samuel understood the trap. This wasn't about Italian money anymore, it was about exposure. Who panicked, who interfered, who reached out, to whom. Razor wasn't testing Eli, he was mapping him. 11:41 p.m. Eli Turner stood in a phone booth on Lenox Avenue, the receiver slick in his hand. He'd already dialed twice and hung up both times. Every call was a thread. Every thread led somewhere Razor could follow. Then the phone rang before Eli touched it. He picked up. "You're early," Eli said. "I don't like deadlines," Razor replied. "They make men sloppy." "What do you want?" Eli asked. Razor didn't answer right away. Instead, he said, "You ever wonder why the Italians picked you?" Eli's throat tightened. "They needed someone trusted," he said. "No," Razor replied. "They needed someone desperate." Eli closed his eyes. Razor continued, calm as ever. "Hospital bills don't stay quiet. Doctors talk, pharmacies talk. You think we didn't hear about your wife before they did?" Eli's heart sank. "You knew," he said. "We knew you'd take it," Razor corrected. "That's different." Eli gripped the receiver harder. "So what was this?" he asked. "A test?" Razor chuckled softly. "No, a cleanup." The word hit harder than any threat. "Your brother made that part easier," Razor added, running around the docks like he had something to prove. Eli's voice cracked. "Where is he?" "Alive," Razor said, "for now." Eli sagged against the glass. "Then tell me what you want," he said. "I'll do it." Razor paused. "I want you to understand something first," he said. "This wasn't a choice between loyalty and money." "What was it?" Eli asked. "A choice between control and chaos," Razor said, "and you let chaos in the door." 11:52 p.m. Samuel heard the footsteps return, closer this time, no flashlight, just boots on wet concrete. A voice spoke from the dark. "You can come out," Razor said, "or you can bleed where you are. Either way, this ends the same." Samuel swallowed. He stood slowly, hands raised, stepping out from behind the crates. Razor stood 10 feet away, coat immaculate, blade absent. 2 men flanked him. Marco's body lay farther down the dock, face turned toward the river. Samuel's chest tightened. "He wasn't supposed to die," Samuel said. Razor tilted his head. "He wasn't supposed to run." Samuel laughed weakly. "You were never scared of him?" "No," Razor said, "but I needed your brother to think you mattered." Samuel's eyes widened. "You used me," he said. Razor nodded. "Your parole, your record, your lungs. You were the perfect lever." Samuel clenched his fists. "So kill me," he said. "Get it over with." Razor studied him for a long moment. Then he said, "I don't need to." Samuel frowned. Razor gestured to one of his men, who stepped forward and handed Samuel a folded envelope. Samuel stared at it. "Open it," Razor said. Inside was a hospital bill, updated, paid in full. Samuel looked up, confused. "What is this?" he asked. "Your brother's proof," Razor said, "that we're finished pretending." Samuel's blood ran cold. "You paid them," he said. "You paid the doctor." "Yes," Razor replied. 3 days ago." Samuel shook his head. "Then why—" "Because Eli needed to believe he was choosing," Razor interrupted. "Men behave honestly when they think the stakes are personal." Samuel felt sick. "You let him think my life was on the line," he said. Razor's eyes hardened. "Your life was on the line." Samuel stepped back. "Then what do you want from him?" he demanded. Razor smiled thinly. "I want him to live," he said, knowing exactly what it cost. Midnight. Eli stood alone in the back room again. The razor lay on the table where he'd left it. The door opened. Razor entered without knocking. Eli stood. "Where's my brother?" he asked. Razor didn't answer. He placed an envelope on the table instead. Eli opened it with shaking hands. "Paid in full." He looked up slowly. "You planned this," Eli said. "Yes," Razor replied. "And you failed?" Eli's voice rose. "My wife is safe," Razor said, "because I decided she would be." Eli staggered back, stunned. "Then why am I here?" he asked. Razor picked up the razor. "Because trust doesn't break when money moves," he said. "It breaks when men think they're smarter than the blade." He stepped closer. "Your brother walks away," Razor said. "You don't." Eli's breath caught. "You said midnight," he whispered. Razor nodded. "It is," he said. And that was when Eli realized the twist wasn't who would die. It was who would be allowed to live with it. They didn't kill Eli Turner that night. That was the punishment. Razor put the blade down on the table, not gently, not hard. Final. Then he slid it across the wood until it stopped inches from Eli's hand. "You don't carry money anymore," Razor said. "You don't speak for anyone. You don't vouch. You don't decide." Eli stared at the razor. His hands trembled, but he didn't touch it. "You live," Razor continued. "You go home. You sit next to your wife. And every time she breathes easy, you remember who paid for that air." Eli's throat tightened. "What about my brother?" Razor's voice was flat. "He leaves Harlem before sunrise. If I see him again, I won't be patient." Razor turned to go, then stopped at the door. "One more thing," he said. "The Italians think you're dead." Eli looked up sharply. "Dead men don't get asked questions," Razor added. "That's the last kindness you'll receive." The door closed. Eli collapsed into the chair, the weight finally landing. Not relief, not grief. Something worse. Clarity. He had been useful. Now he was finished. Samuel didn't come home. He followed instructions exactly. He packed nothing that couldn't be burned. He left before dawn, coughing hard enough to draw looks from strangers who didn't matter anymore. At the bus station, he unfolded the hospital bill again. Paid. Signed. Real. His brother hadn't saved their family. Someone else had decided to. That knowledge hollowed him out. He boarded the bus without looking back. 2 days later, Eli sat beside his wife in the hospital room. The machines hummed softly. Her breathing was steadier now. The doctor smiled more. Nurses stopped asking about insurance. Eli nodded when spoken to. He answered when required. But he didn't sleep. Every sound in the hallway made his muscles tighten. Every shadow felt like a test he no longer had permission to pass. A man who once moved freely now measured every step. People noticed. By the end of the week, word spread quietly. Eli Turner was done. Not arrested, not buried, just absent. Doors stopped opening, calls stopped coming. Men he'd protected crossed the street to avoid eye contact. That was Razor's real cut. On Sunday evening, Eli returned to the bar on 125th Street. The back room was empty, the table was bare, except for a thin line etched into the wood, a shallow groove where the razor had rested. Eli traced it with his finger and felt something break. Not loudly, not cleanly. He hadn't lost his life. He hadn't even lost his family. He'd lost the one thing that had ever made his fear useful. And the question that followed him out into the street wasn't whether he could survive like this. It was whether survival, stripped of purpose, was just another form of punishment. Harlem felt it before anyone said it out loud. By Monday morning, the flow had shifted. Not violently, not loudly. Just enough that the wrong men started standing in the right places and the right men stopped being asked. Eli Turner's name didn't come up in meetings anymore. That absence created space, and space never stayed empty. Razor didn't announce a replacement. He didn't have to. He let the vacuum do the work. 3 different men stepped forward, each thinking the silence meant opportunity. Each one started talking too much. Each one made himself visible. 2 were corrected within a week. 1 disappeared. The message was clear. The system no longer trusted familiar hands. That made everyone nervous. Routes changed. Drop times shifted by minutes instead of hours. Runners were doubled, then tripled. The streets slowed down, and when things slow down, mistakes surface. The Italians noticed first. They sent feelers, quiet ones, questions without names attached. The answer came back the same every time. Eli Turner was finished, not dead. Worse. A man who once bridged 2 worlds now belonged to neither. He couldn't warn anyone, couldn't smooth anything over. His silence was enforced, not voluntary. Downtown crews pulled back, not because they were afraid, but because they no longer trusted what they couldn't see. The delay cost them money, pride, face. Someone had to answer for that. Marco Bellini's body was found 3 days later, washed up near the pilings. Officially, it was an accident. Unofficially, it closed a ledger. That wasn't the end of it. Samuel's disappearance didn't go unnoticed either. People whispered that Eli had traded his own blood to save himself. Others said Razor had taken the brother and spared the man as a joke. Eli heard none of it directly. He heard it in pauses, in the way conversation stopped when he entered a room, in the way bartenders served him quickly and turned away. Fear had moved on. It no longer needed him. One night, a young runner, barely old enough to shave, sat beside Eli at the bar without asking. "They say you used to matter," the kid said. Eli didn't respond. The kid waited, then laughed awkwardly and walked off. Razor watched all of this from a distance. He didn't interfere. The point wasn't to destroy Eli, it was to make him instructive, a living example of what happened when trust tried to negotiate. By the end of the month, order had returned. Leaner, sharper, less forgiving. And the streets settled into a new understanding. No one was indispensable. Not even the man who used to carry everything. But beneath that calm was a quieter ripple, one that didn't fade. Because somewhere outside Harlem, a sick man with a criminal record and a paid hospital bill was breathing air he didn't earn. And somewhere inside Harlem, a trusted man was alive without being allowed to matter, which raised an unsettling question that no one dared ask aloud. What happens when the cost of order is leaving the wrong people standing? 6 months later, the doctor told Eli Turner the truth he hadn't asked for. His wife was improving, but not because of the treatment. The damage had already been done. The money had bought comfort, not a cure. Eli sat in the hospital hallway, hands folded, listening as the doctor explained timelines and limits. None of it sounded real. All of it sounded final. When the doctor left, Eli stayed seated. For the first time since that night on 125th Street, the math changed. All that fear, all that obedience, all that silence. And the ending was the same one he'd been running from. She died 2 weeks later. Quietly, no drama, no violence, just a breath that didn't come back. At the funeral, men Eli once protected stood at a distance, unsure if they were allowed to grieve near him. Razor didn't come. He didn't need to. The lesson had already landed. That night, Eli walked Harlem alone, past the bar, past the back room, past the places where his name once opened doors. Nothing reacted to him. No eyes followed. No warnings traveled ahead of him. He reached into his coat pocket and felt something thin. The razor. He didn't remember taking it. Maybe he never gave it back. He stood under a streetlight and looked at it, not as a weapon, not as a threat, but as a receipt. Proof of payment. Eli understood something then that no one had bothered to explain. The system hadn't spared him out of mercy. It had spared him because survival without meaning was the sharper cut. He dropped the razor into a storm drain and listened until it stopped clinking. Then he kept walking, unnoticed, into a life that would never ask anything of him again. And that's the part most people get wrong about stories like this. The worst fate isn't dying for a mistake. It's living long enough to understand exactly what you traded and realizing it bought you nothing. If you want more stories where the price is never what it seems, you know what to do.